Imagine you're walking through unfamiliar territory. You don't have a map. You don't have a phone. All you have is a stick, a piece of meat wrapped in leaves, and a bad feeling in your gut. You come to a narrow path between two hills. The wind shifts, and somewhere close, you hear it. A low rumble, not thunder. Breathing. You freeze, because on the other side of that ridge is something that could kill you in about 4 seconds, and it knows you're there before you even see it. This is the moment that shaped almost everything about how early humans moved through the world. Not curiosity, not exploration for its own sake. Boundaries. Invisible lines that meant the difference between going home and not going home at all. Today, when we hear the word boundary, we think of something emotional, setting limits with a coworker, saying no to a family member. It's a concept about protecting your peace. But for early humans, a boundary wasn't a feeling. It was a location, a specific, physical line in the dirt that you crossed at your own risk. And the humans who survived long enough to pass on their genes were the ones who learned to read those lines and respect them. So let's talk about what those boundaries actually were and why ignoring them got people killed. The first boundary is the one you'd expect: territory belonging to something bigger and stronger than you. Large predators like cave lions, short-faced bears, and saber-toothed cats didn't wander randomly. They marked and defended specific ranges. Scent marking, scratch trees, and even vocal signals told other animals, including humans, exactly where the danger zone started. Archaeologists studying cave sites in Europe have found something telling. Human occupation layers and predator occupation layers rarely overlap in time. When a cave shows signs of cave bear use, hibernation dens, bones, claw marks, human tools from the same period are almost always absent. It's not because humans didn't want that shelter. Caves were incredibly valuable. It's because they knew better than to fight for it. The second boundary was territorial, but between human groups themselves. This is where it gets more complicated, because unlike a predator's scent marking, this kind of boundary was symbolic. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies, groups like the Hadza in Tanzania and the San in the Kalahari, have documented something called buffer zones. These are unclaimed strips of land between two groups' core territories, sometimes several kilometers wide, that neither group actively uses. Nobody has to announce them. Nobody draws a line. But everyone in both groups knows exactly where they are. And the reason these buffer zones exist isn't politeness. It's survival math. Wildlife tends to concentrate in these unused zones because hunting pressure is lower there. So the buffer isn't just a boundary. It's also accidentally a wildlife reserve that both groups benefit from without anyone planning it that way. Now here's where the story gets interesting, because we tend to assume ancient humans respected boundaries out of instinct or fear. But there's growing evidence they built actual physical markers to communicate danger deliberately for people who weren't even born yet. At sites across Scandinavia, archaeologists have found what are called cairns, deliberate stacks of stones, some dating back over 6,000 years, positioned along dangerous mountain paths and unstable ice routes. These weren't random. They were placed at exactly the points where a wrong step meant a fall. A cairn doesn't say anything. It doesn't have words, but it says everything. Someone stood here before you. Someone thought about the person who would come next. That's not instinct. That's communication across generations of people who never met each other. And it gets even more specific. In Aboriginal Australian culture, there's a concept that anthropologists call songlines, pathways across the landscape encoded into songs, stories, and ceremonies that map both the safest travel routes and the most dangerous ones. A songline might describe a rock formation as the resting place of an ancestral being, and that description alone would be enough to keep generations of people from disturbing that specific location. Some of these songlines have been dated through comparison with geological and coastal evidence to describe landscapes that existed over 10,000 years ago, landscapes that don't even exist in that form anymore, which means people were encoding boundary information into stories so effectively that the information survived even after the physical landscape itself changed underneath it. This is where the common assumption falls apart. We like to imagine early humans as reactive, running from danger as it appeared. But the evidence says something different. They were proactive. They mapped danger. They marked it. They told stories specifically designed to make children afraid of the right things before those children ever encountered them directly. There's a concept in psychology called prepared learning. The idea that humans are biologically primed to fear certain things faster than others. Snakes, spiders, sudden movement, deep water. But cultural boundary marking took that biological head start and supercharged it. A child who grew up hearing that a certain gorge was cursed, that a certain cave belonged to something angry, that a certain river bend swallowed people whole, didn't need to test that boundary personally. The fear was pre-installed. And the ones who tested it anyway, well, That's exactly why the story kept getting told. Because it worked. Now let's talk about water, because this is one of the most underrated boundaries in all of human history. Rivers, lakes, and watering holes were simultaneously the most necessary resource on Earth and one of the deadliest places to be. Predators know that prey has to drink, so they wait near water. Crocodiles, big cats, and other ambush predators concentrate around water sources specifically because they know something eventually has to show up. Fossil evidence from sites in East Africa shows disproportionately high numbers of hominin remains found near ancient water sources, and a significant percentage show signs of predation. This created one of the earliest and most consistent boundaries in human behavior. Never approach water carelessly, never approach it alone if you can help it, and never approach it at dusk or dawn when predators are most active. Groups that ignored this pattern simply didn't get the chance to teach it to the next generation. And this connects to something bigger. Every boundary we've talked about, predator territory, rival group buffer zones, cairns on cliff paths, songlines across the desert, dangerous water sources, they all share one thing in common. They weren't enforced by fences or walls. They were enforced by memory and story. A boundary only works if the next generation believes it. And that means somebody, around a fire, in a cave, on a long walk, had to explain why. Not just where the line was, but what happens if you cross it. That's the part that made humans different from every other species, drawing invisible lines in the dirt. Animals mark territory with scent that fades in weeks. Humans mark territory with stories that lasted thousands of years. A wolf's scent marking dies with the wind. A songline survives 10,000 years of coastline change. That's not a small difference. That's the entire reason human culture exists the way it does. So when you look at that thumbnail, a man standing at a do not cross line, staring down something enormous and dangerous, that's not just a funny image. That's a 5 million-year-old survival strategy compressed into one frame. Every boundary humans have ever respected, physical or social, sacred or practical, exists because somebody before us decided it was worth remembering, worth telling, worth passing on. The people who ignored those boundaries, we don't have their stories. We only have the stories of the ones who listened, who looked at the line in the ground, and decided that some curiosity isn't worth the risk. And maybe that's the real inheritance. Not the tools, not the fire, not even the language, but the simple, ancient understanding that some lines exist for a reason, and the smartest thing you can do is respect them, even when you don't fully understand why.